we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to At the Core with Walker, Wildmon, and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution coach, coming to you from the Florida Leadership Congress at the State Capitol. We had such a good time with the students yesterday that we're knocking out an extra program to air on American Family Radio again. So, by the way, thank you, students. You did a fantastic job on the House floor today. Loved watching you debate. Got to visit most of your committee rooms for at least a little bit and see how well you were doing in there as well. So, anyway, God bless you, and thanks for joining me here on the radio again today. Patriot Academy. Yeah. That's where you cheer. That's where you're supposed to. Yeah, thank you. That's good. See, we don't have it's not like a studio where we have the applause lights and like in the 50s, and I need to cue you guys when I say something funny so you know when to laugh. Can somebody? Yeah, that's good. That's pretty good. We should just record that right there and I'll just play that back anytime I have a good. I just rarely have a good joke, so it wouldn't be very often that we play. Anyway, I thought it went fantastic when we recorded yesterday, so I wanted to do another program with you guys today. So be thinking about your questions and what you'd like to ask, and maybe even want to talk about, some of the things that are happening in the news today, or even some of your bills that you're hearing on or here at the Florida Capitol. So we do this all over the country. We just did Colorado and Idaho. We're in Florida. We're going to be headed to Delaware and Texas and Indiana. And we do this throughout the summer. So if you're listening right now and you've never heard of Patriot Academy or the Leadership Congresses, go to patriotacademy.com. Click on Leadership Congress. Whether you're a young leader wanting to learn, or maybe you never thought about yourself as a leader before, but you would like to find out if you've got those leadership skills within you, I guarantee you do, then come to Leadership Congress. 16 to 25-year-olds in state capitals across the country throughout the summer. And then if you're not 16 to 25, then you need to sign up as a Constitution coach, start teaching our Constitution classes, and come to our Constitution Coach Congress, which we do in August, as well as our Military Veterans Leadership Congress. So everybody has an opportunity to do this, whatever your age. And then we've started doing a new thing at Patriot Academy called the Patriot Experience. We actually built our own House chamber, our own legislative hall at the Patriot Academy campus. It's a replica of the Texas House. And it's an opportunity for people of all ages to come in. We've had people, grandparents coming with their grandkids and actually having the opportunity to go through the program together. So very, very cool. A lot of that's growing. Go check it out at patriotacademy.com. All right, so our students here, 16 to 25 from across the nation, some from as far away as California. Yesterday, we heard from a student from North Carolina, a lot of the students from Florida, and then our governor is from Missouri. So we've got a really good mix here and having a great time. So y'all be thinking of some really good questions, comments, insults, whatever you got, bring them, and we'll let you drive the conversation. We'll go to whatever topic that you guys want to go to. We've had a couple of interesting things happen at Patriot Academy over the last few months because of our campus that we started, which we wanted to do for years. Many of the students that are seated in front of me right now, they have only experienced a regional Patriot Academy, which is essentially 3 days. Some of them have been to our National Leadership Congress, which is a full 7 days, even better. And this year, for the first time, we're doing a full 30 days. Our Patriot Institute is an opportunity to learn at the Patriot Academy campus in full-time residence. And it's basically your option. You can do 1 month, 1 semester, or a whole year. And this summer in July will be the first opportunity to do 1 month. So it'll be 30 days from July 2nd to August 2nd, a phenomenal opportunity to learn from people like Adam Curry. He's the guy that actually invented the podcast with Steve Jobs all those years ago. He's going to be teaching on podcasting and media and what he sees next. What is the next level of communication, especially for y'all that are here at Patriot Academy, for your generation? How is technology going to change even in the next few years and determine how you're going to be able to communicate with your colleagues, with your generation? How can you be an influencer in your generation and actually have a positive impact on what's happening? So Adam's going to talk about that and just his story. He goes all the way back to the 80s and being a, not VH1. What was the other one? MTV, being a MTV, what do they call that? VJ, being a VJ back then, the big hair like John Bon Jovi. Anyway, Adam's going to be a blast. Y'all are going to have fun learning from him. Laura Logan, I call her the last living journalist, actual journalist on the planet. She's amazing. She lives right there by our campus, and she's going to come out and teach on journalism. I don't know if does anybody in here have has that been a tug at your heart at all to be in media or journalism? Everybody's got kind of a different thing that they might be interested in, business, politics, whatever. Does anybody out there, we don't have enough good constitutional Christian conservatives going into journalism. So I'm hoping maybe somehow, some way, that becomes something that you guys see as a future for you. We need more going into that field. Who else? Let's see. We got, Jimmy Pruitt, of course. My pastor will be there to do some teaching. Chris Dunham, who's the most popular speaker at Patriot Academy every year. And then we'll probably pipe in a lot of our friends from Daily Wire and all the other folks around the country that are a part of this movement. All right. So no questions. Nobody's come forward. This is great. That means I've taught you so much in the last 24 hours. I have solved all your problems. You have no questions about life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. None of it? Okay, we got one. Here we go. So we're not going to take phone calls today. So, 888-589-8840. Write it down. You can do that at our next program. But no calls today. We're going to do all of our questions directly here with the Patriot Academy students. Go ahead. Your question today or comment or insult.
My name is Elijah.
Where are you from?
Land O'Lakes, Florida. Since no one volunteered, I wanted to ask you about what your thoughts on the penumbra theory and the right to privacy.
What is the penumbra theory?
As decided in Griswold versus Connecticut, it establishes the right to privacy in the Constitution.
So Griswold's the one that outlawed or kept you from being able to outlaw birth control, right? Wasn't that the one with the?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what was the second half of the question? Say it again.
And the right to privacy found in the Constitution.
Okay. Yeah. So this is one of those where I really do think that the Supreme Court essentially made this up out of thin air, which they do a lot. It's essentially the same argument for abortion. There's nothing in the Constitution that guarantees abortion, but the Supreme Court, if they stood just right and, held out their arms just right and balanced themselves, they could see this new thing in the Constitution. The problem with that is that then the next Supreme Court doesn't see it and they outlaw whatever that thing is. And so you end up with this, literally having whiplash about what the law should actually be. Perfect example of that would be, and I'll come back to right to privacy in just a second, but the perfect example of that would be Justice Kennedy when it came to gay marriage. So he first said, no, gay marriage was not guaranteed in the Constitution. And it really just depends on what he has for cereal that day, because then just a couple of years later, he completely reversed in Obergefell and said, yeah, somehow, the kind of sex that you have and wanting to have sex with someone other than the opposite sex is somehow guaranteed in the Constitution, something the founders would have been appalled at. And if, if you think you can get, the majority of the country to do a constitutional amendment to require gay marriage, then go for it. But that's not what happened. What happened was one Supreme Court justice changed his opinion, and by changing his opinion, that switched to a 5-4, and now we have homosexual marriage in this country that literally degrades what actual marriage is. And that's not, just me saying that. That's every religion, every country in the history of mankind until about 15 minutes ago. Okay, maybe 15 years ago, but still the same thing. Anyway, so right to privacy depends on what you mean by that. And that's why it shouldn't be something that the Supreme Court gets to decide. What do you mean by that? Because that's what actually allows for saying you have a right to an abortion as well. So I'm a strict constructionist. So my position is James Madison's position that if the Constitution doesn't actually say it, then it doesn't exist. Now, granted, and I bet you'll probably go here next, the Ninth Amendment does say that all of your rights are not listed in the Constitution. So you would have to argue for a right to privacy from the Ninth Amendment. All of the government's power is listed in the Constitution, but our freedoms and our rights are not exhausted in the Constitution. The question is whether or not it's a constitutional right that the government must enforce or protect. And I think that's where the whole right to privacy thing becomes, in my opinion, abused. I think a society should be able to come together. You ought to be able to come together with your neighbors in your neighborhood, in your community, in your state, and be able to say some things are not going to be allowed. Now, I would not personally support a ban on birth control. I think that is a personal decision that you ought to be able to make. I wouldn't vote for that. But should a society be able to say no to that and not allow that in their particular society? Yeah, I think they should be able to do that. And then if you don't like that, you move to the next society over, whether that's a state or a community or whatever it might be. Muddy enough?
Yes.
Close. And you need to come this summer to the Patriot Institute. So I know you're thinking about it.
I'm thinking about it.
All right. I hope you come. All right. Next up, go ahead. Tell us your name, where you're from, and your comment, question, or insult.
Hey, I'm Joshua Stuckey. I'm from Gainesville, Georgia. And I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on private citizens owning modern military class and quality weapons?
So give us an example of what you would want us to consider letting modern citizens have.
Well, I'm mainly asking, do you think that citizens could own military vehicles or tanks or other large bore weapons?
Yes, 100%. I want one. I want a tank. I want surface to air missiles. I want all of it. Look, here's the deal. If you believe in the Second Amendment and the actual history of the Second Amendment, the whole point of the Second Amendment was that the citizenry would have the same ability to wage war as the government, so that you could actually fight government. Second Amendment is not for hunting, and it is not only for your ability to defend yourself in the moment. That is part of it, no question about it. But it is also for being able to fight back against the government. And don't take my word for it. Go read literally every single founding father, read what they said about how important arms are and the ability of the citizen to be able to have those arms. Go look at what the militia was. So when you read the Second Amendment, a lot of people, they get hung up on a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. They get hung up on militia, and they think, oh, well, that means only National Guard or police. Or, Michael Bloomberg, was mayor of New York years ago. He said, citizens should not be allowed to have guns because they won't know when to use them or when to fire them, and the police know best. And so just leave it to the police to decide whenever it's necessary to do that. Lots of problems with that, not least of which is when you need police in seconds, they're minutes away. There's no way for the police to be in every situation and prevent that maniac or dirtbag from coming in and murdering people or committing other crimes. But also just the fact that if only the police had guns, you would virtually guarantee tyranny. I mean, it just always ends up emanating from that. So the ability to defend ourselves in war against any other entity is essential. Now, to today's technology, it's a lot harder than in the founding era. And for those poorly informed or willing to lie individuals like Joe Biden, who used to run around all the time and say you couldn't have a cannon in the founding era, he's absolutely wrong about that. You could absolutely have a cannon in the founding era. And in fact, the only ordinance that we can find did not outlaw you from having a cannon, just simply said, please stop firing your cannon in the middle of the night. You're waking people up. So that would be the closest thing. A cannon at that time would be the closest thing to what you just described, tanks and that sort of thing. So I absolutely think you should be allowed to have a tank, and I'm not kidding when I say I want one. Now, I will say biological weapons and nuclear weapons is a much tougher question, right? That, number one, it's almost impossible to develop and be able to have. But even if you could do that, I probably would support a line at that point and saying that's a weapon of mass destruction that we wouldn't want just anybody to be able to have. Now, I realize that sounds hypocritical, and that sounds like, okay, well, if I draw the line there, then somebody could argue, well, then why should you be able to have a fully automatic rifle that can kill, 50 people if you're able to change out your 30-round mag fast enough or whatever? They're going to make that same argument for that. The difference is that I can fight back against that person that has a fully automatic weapon. I can't really fight back against a nuclear bomb or a biological weapon. So it really does completely decimate without the ability to actually wage war. So that'd be a good one for us to philosophically think through, like even at that extreme. But most people today would probably draw the line a lot different than I would. I want it way out there. Like I'm totally for every weapon that you mentioned and a lot of other ones as well. And yes, I would like to have an F-35. So if anybody has an extra $1 billion laying around and you could buy one for me from, I don't know, the U.S., Israel, somebody that we've given one to. Anyway, great question. All right. Wait, let me look at my clock here. Okay, we got 2 minutes before break. So we might not get done answering your question, but let's at least get it.
All right. My name's Trevor Waller. I'm from Tallahassee, Florida. And my question is voting a right or a privilege?
Is voting a right or a privilege? And you're from right here in Tallahassee. You traveled the least far of everyone here.
That's true.
Oh, so did you grow up here in Tallahassee?
Yeah, basically.
All right. Okay. So Tallahassee resident wants to know whether or not voting is a right or a privilege. I would argue, well, it depends. If you're talking about a citizen that has the right to vote, then I would even argue it's not a privilege. It is a duty. So it's not just that you have the right to vote. If you don't vote, I would argue that you're the wicked and slothful servant that has buried the talent that God gave you, that talent of freedom and that talent of responsibility. So I'm not sure if that quite answers your question because it goes to a third option of it being a duty. But and maybe the next question would be, can it be taken away then? And I'm one of these people that thinks that even if you're a felon, if you did your time, then when you come home, you should be able to have a firearm. You should be able to vote. You should be able to do those things. So that's probably controversial. Maybe somebody wants to debate me on that one today. But excellent question. We can do follow-ups on that if you want, but I got to take a quick break. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. You're listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. We're actually coming to you from Florida. We're doing the Leadership Congress here. So Leadership Congress is a youth leadership program that we do 16 to 25-year-olds. We do this around the country in state capitals across the nation. And then we also have versions for adults, the Military Veterans Leadership Congress and the Constitution Coach Leadership Congress. Learn more about all of them at patriotacademy.com, patriotacademy.com. And by the way, especially if you're in the Midwest or actually anywhere in the country, it's not too late to sign up for the Indiana one. The Midwest Leadership Congress is not until August, so check that out at patriotacademy.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back on At the Core.
Is our theology of money upside down? Our vision is that all Christians would see God as their ultimate treasure. You know, it's a game changer of an idea, and we start with this idea that God owns everything, and we are his household managers of what he has entrusted to us. So we own nothing, but we have stewardship responsibilities.
Faith and Finance with Rob West, weekdays at 9 a.m. Central or on the AFR app.
1 Million Moms has received complaints about an Arm & Hammer laundry commercial where Meghan Trainor deliberately insinuates profanity. Instead of a wholesome commercial, Arm & Hammer deliberately chose to produce something controversial. 1 Million Moms finds this highly inappropriate. Arm & Hammer should have the corporate responsibility not to offend families. Arm & Hammer needs to know that parents disapprove. Take action at 1millionmoms.com. That's 1millionmoms.com.
At the Core podcast are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
We're back here on At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for staying with me. Coming to you from the Florida State Capitol of Tallahassee. I actually did not stop and read all the signage over in the old House and Senate chamber that probably would give me the good reasons. But why in the world is the State Capitol in Florida up here in the Panhandle and not in the middle of Florida? Makes no sense to me. It's hard to fly in here. Sorry, Mr. Tallahassee, that just asked a question. I'm dissing on your city. Okay. Next question from all right, students here at the Leadership Congress are asking questions for us, and our next question is going to be from
Nyla Rios. I'm from Santa Rosa Beach, Florida.
All right.
So in conservative circles, there seems to be a divide on opinions about the pharmaceutical industry. Some view the industry as filled with corporate greed and corruption and a danger to public health, especially in the case of vaccines. Others oppose things like Medicare drug price negotiations under the Inflation Reduction Act and want more policies to benefit the industry in order to promote your innovation. What are your thoughts on the pharmaceutical industry?
Excellent question. Okay, I actually can sum up my thoughts about the pharmaceutical industry by simply calling them what I normally call them, the medical industrial complex. I'm a free market guy, so I do not like government involvement in the market. But unfortunately, the pharmaceutical industry has been propped up by government so long that it became so wealthy that then it turned around and bought government. So the fact that we allowed the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industrial complex to essentially take over our government and call the shots, and that's through the FDA, through the Center for Demented Confusion, known as the CDC, or you might want to call them the Center for Disease Creation instead of Disease Control. I know I'm sounding very cynical and sarcastic right now, but it's because I've been shocked at how much power they've been able to wield, and the fact that we pay for their advertising, we pay for their research and development, and then they turn around and make all these profits, and they end up with special protections. I'm a Reagan guy. Look, I named a kid Reagan. I got another kid born on Ronald Reagan's birthday. I used to have a dog named Dutch. Okay, I've done a documentary on Ronald Reagan. I got Reagan street cred. Ronald Reagan was 100% wrong to give vaccine manufacturers immunity. There is no one that should have absolute immunity for their product. You should be held accountable if your product harms someone. And once we did that, it caused those companies to no longer be honest, to no longer actually do the research and development to make sure that the product's actually safe. They have no longer the incentive to do that. So we've allowed them to foist upon us a money-making machine. It's a golden goose for them. And back when I was fighting for parental rights in vaccine choice, I'm actually not an anti-vaxxer. I think some vaccines have been absolute miracles, medical miracles that have saved millions and millions of lives, eradicated some diseases. Amazing. What I'm against is the government forcing you to get a vaccine through a schedule that you are not allowed to go to school or end up in public places unless you follow that entire schedule. And at the time I was working to give parental choice in this, there were only 32 doses that children were getting in about the first 5 years. And that was enough for me to say, that's way too much. And even at that time, there was no study on the combination of all 32 doses and what it did to the human body. Now it's 72 doses, and there's still not a study, not a single study to tell us what happens when you actually put that much of these foreign substances into the human body, especially at 2 days old, 6 months old, 2 years old. So it's become an absolute travesty, and I think it's because of the political power that we've allowed the pharmaceutical companies to have. The harder part is I don't know the solution. I don't know, because of being a free marketer, I'm very hesitant about some of the ideas that, for instance, RFK has about limiting their advertising and that sort of thing. and it's tough because I never supported you remember there's certain bans in some states on attorneys being able to advertise, and I've never thought that should be allowed. I think if you advertise, and as long as you're being honest and you're not lying in your advertising, that's why attorneys can't advertise. That was funny, man. I don't care I'm an attorney, and that was a good joke. Man. Bill, I think I'm going to have to give up the comedian routine. It's not working. All right. Anyway, but I just don't think the state should be able to tell you that. However, I totally get what RFK is saying about the fact that you literally have all of the news outlets bought and paid for by, whether it's certain big pharma companies or other major industries. It's become a major problem. So anyway, I don't know what the right solution is, except starting with government not having any force and government not having any say in what you inject into your body. There is nothing about the people in Washington, D.C. at the Center for Disease Control or FDA or the NIH or any of that. There is no reason that we should think that they are such experts that they know better than we do about what's best for our child. And too many American people have bought that lie. And so they think if Pope Fauci comes on TV and says, you need to get this vaccine, that everybody should get it. No, what you should do is say, thank you for the advice. Now I'm going to go research what the pros and cons are. I'm going to do the cost benefit analysis, just like I would if you came to me and said, if you were my doctor and you said, you need to have, open heart surgery, or you need to do, whatever other routine. I'm going to research that, and I'm going to get other opinions, and I'm going to find out. The American people, too many of the American people have bought the lie, hook, line, and sinker, that the supposed experts are always right. Well, if anything came out of COVID, I hope it proved that the experts can be flat wrong. And whenever they are the only ones that are allowed to have an opinion, millions of people can end up being harmed. So yeah, great question. I'm very passionate about this particular issue. What I don't want to do, and I think your question actually raised this in a way. I don't want to shut down research, and I don't want to prevent what our free market economy created. There's a reason that the American health system is the best in the world, and why socialized medicine ends up making our system worse and cost more and all of those things. Competition works. And so I'm all for people being able to bring things to market and us being able to try it. And if it doesn't work or people get harmed, you're allowed to sue them. And that chaos of the market, it's no different than Adam Smith's invisible hand that he talked about. It will make we'll end up with more inventions, and we'll end up with better healthcare. But when government says you have to do this company's vaccine or this company's treatment, or even like with Medicare and Medicaid, that these are the only options that you have. Biggest problem with that is government should have never been involved in healthcare at all. There shouldn't be a Medicare or Medicaid at the federal level. There's nothing in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to have a single say about healthcare. All right, I'll stop filibustering. I'll tell one more story, and then I'll shut up. No, I won't shut up, but I will let you ask a question. The best example of this is, in fact, COVID compared to Spanish flu. So if you go back 100 years to Spanish flu, very similar perceived danger here. But Spanish flu was actually 25 times worse than COVID. Not twice as bad, not 10 times as bad, 25 times more deadly than COVID. COVID turned out to be a 0.1 case fatality rate. Okay, that means you had a 99.9% chance of survival. Anybody remember whenever all the media was saying at the beginning of COVID, it's going to be a 3.4% case fatality rate? Same report from every news outlet. 3.4% case fatality rate would have been a massacre. I mean, it would have devastated the world and America. That would have truly been a Black Plague type situation, which is why when this all happened initially, everybody canceled everything and we shut down. We stayed home for 2 weeks. And because if it's going to be 3.4 cases, you really do have a Black Plague on your hand. Anybody remember Donald Trump coming out and saying, actually, I think it's probably not going to be worse than a really bad flu year. In a bad flu year, you end up with, I forget the numbers. I used to have all this memorized 4 years ago, but how many people die from the flu every year, which miraculously nobody died from the flu during COVID. Imagine that. But his whole point was, we're going to probably have a pretty decent death rate here, but it's not going to be any worse than a really bad flu year. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So I don't know how he knew that. I don't know who was telling him that whenever, Pope Fauci and Dr. Birx and wanting everybody to wear goggles and 4 masks and shields and everything else and lying to the American people about it. I don't know where he got that idea, but he was absolutely right about it. Spanish flu was not like that. Spanish flu, children were getting Spanish flu in the morning and they were dead by midnight. And it was bad. Even in that environment with a literal, like a Black Plague-like situation on our hands, The federal government did nothing. Absolutely nothing. Didn't spend a penny. I don't know how the world survived without the little 6-foot sticker, stay away 6 feet away from each other. And humanity's still here. And they didn't have those stickers in 1917 and 18. They didn't spend a penny, didn't pay people to stay home, didn't quarantine healthy people. We have never quarantined healthy people in history. This was the first time we did that. We didn't do any of that nonsense. They did masks in some of the public transit areas in San Francisco and a couple other big cities. Nobody had a mask mandate or a stay-at-home mandate for 6 months or a year or whatever it was. People asked churches and theaters to close for the most I could find looking in everywhere was 6 weeks was the most that any government asked anybody to stay closed. And even then it was an ask. It was not a demand. So there wasn't this, martial law type situation that they did. So just know that. Just know how bad Spanish flu was. And without the government, the federal government doing anything, we won World War I and survived Spanish flu at the same time. And now state governments should be involved in healthcare, I think. I think that's a proper role to state and local government, but federal government should have nothing to do with it. And that's why the pharmaceutical industry has become so powerful, because they've been able to collude with the federal government. That's not free market. That's crony capitalism. So anyway, I didn't mean to get so, thank you. You that was a great question. I used up half our program on that one question. What's your opinion? I should have asked you. What do you think? After my tirade, she's like, oh my goodness, I better not say anything nice about Pfizer. Yeah.
I just finished a season of healthcare policy debate in Team Policy. So this was actually a prominent case is to repeal the Medicare drug price negotiations. So that was, I think, it was a good case. But there were also different things like patent strategies that companies currently use. And so they're kind of bypassing the free market system, and they're using anti-competitive practices. So it's not truly a free market. Right. I'm not entirely sure still on my opinions of the Medicare drug price negotiations. I think we should balance innovation with protecting public health.
Ooh, that was good. Give her a hand. That was. It is painfully obvious that the students at Patriot Academy are way smarter than the founder of Patriot Academy. I mean, she used a lot bigger words with more syllables. Some of them I didn't even understand, and obviously knew a lot more about the subject as well. So well done, well done. All right, next question.
Hi, my name is Caleb Dowd. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. And my question is about, so what do you think about Trump sending Marines to help with the protests in Los Angeles? And does that violate using the military against its people?
First of all, I want to know, Caleb, how in the world you're from South Carolina and you didn't say, I'm from South Carolina? Have you been there your whole life?
No, I grew up in Washington State.
There you go. See, he doesn't talk right. So you got to move to the South to learn how to talk right. How long you been in South Carolina?
4 years.
4 years. You should be talking right by now. You say y'all. Okay, at least you say y'all. Okay. Well, we talked about this some yesterday, so I'm going to do it in summary fashion. He absolutely has the right to do so, constitutional power to do so, and congressionally delegated authority to do so. I think it should always be done. I mean, in only the rarest of circumstances where the state is not taking care of the situation, which clearly California was not, or you have the concern that this is going to spread like wildfire all over the country like it did in 2020. And so the president 100% has the power to do it. 20 times presidents have invoked the Insurrection Act to do what he's doing. 12 different presidents have done it prior to President Trump, Democrat, Republican, Federalist, anti-Federalist. George Washington did it. He was the first one to do it. And so, yes, absolutely, he should be able to do it. I actually think he should do it with a heavy hand. Like, I think he should not only be protecting the federal buildings, I think he should go in and say, if they're doing violence, stop them. Now, if they're just protesting, then, hey, he's all for it, just like I'm all for it. But if they're blocking, if you block the streets, then, hey, Florida, I know we've been having this debate between Texas and Florida and who's better. Thank you, Ron DeSantis, for basically saying, if they block the streets, run them over. I mean, you're impeding commerce. You're preventing ambulances from being able to get people to the hospital. You're preventing pregnant people. I sound like a liberal. Pregnant women. Wow. They even changed my terminology. That's terrible. Anyway, so yeah, I think he should do it fast and do it hard so that it stops it, or it at least says, if you do violence, we're absolutely going to arrest you. And I think that's kind of happened because I think it prevented the No Kings rallies from getting out of control. Yeah, go ahead. Follow-up question.
Yeah, so if that's the case, I understand that with like the National Guard, but he specifically sent the Marines to help. And so if he can send the Marines, then why does the Constitution say that you can't use the military against its own people.
So yeah, potato for me, because once you call forth the militia, which is what Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 15 allows you to do, once you call forth the National Guard, it's the same as having the Marines or the Army. They're now federalized. They're absolutely no different. So it's not that posse comitatus. The whole thing about you can never use the military is misunderstood. You can actually use the military, just like George Washington did to stop the Whiskey Rebellion. What that's generally used to prevent is it's got to only be under an insurrection act. There are only 3 exceptions. You're doing it to prevent an invasion, an insurrection, or to enforce the laws. So it's a rare situation. I think it's also proper and right to say that the border was invaded and that we had a literal invasion in the country. It's also why this is a little bit of a segue here, but it's also why states should constitutionally be able to enforce the border. So under Article 1, Section 10, if the federal government's not doing it under Article 4, Section 4 like they're supposed to, governors can do it. It's one reason I was always very disappointed in Governor Abbott, is that he didn't do everything that he could have done, even from the beginning. At the end, he did a lot of show and finally started doing a little bit of what he could have done, but it was too little, too late. So anyway, great question. All right, I think I have 2 minutes till break, so let's try to get one more in, or at least get the question.
Sure. I'm Levi Seibert from Huntsville, Alabama. My question is, what's your thoughts on higher education, and should government pay for it?
First of all, where is Pontsville?
Huntsville, sorry.
Oh, Huntsville. Okay, so I know where Huntsville is. Same thing, man. You don't sound like my mama. My mama's from Mobile, and she talks like she's from Alabama. Why don't you talk like you're from Alabama? Did you grow up there?
Yeah.
Wow.
6 years old.
Man, I bet you use big syllable words too. Okay, you asked me about education. Should the federal government be doing anything with it? Was that specifically federal government? That's an easy one. Absolutely not. Zero. Zilch. Nada. They should have nothing to do with education. Didn't have anything to do with education for most of our country's history, right? There's nothing in the Constitution that allows for the federal government to do education. Jimmy Carter's the one that created this Department of Education. So just think about how much better our education system has become since the 1970s. That was a joke. Thank you for being one. Thank you, Representative Stuckey, for laughing. Only one, it was just not enough. Anyway, yes, of course it's gotten worse because the federal government does nothing but muck up the works. $300 billion a year right now that we're spending through the Department of Education. I think President Trump should not only shut down the Department of Education. Actually, he shouldn't shut it down. What he should do is keep 10 employees. Well, let's just go with 50. Keep 50 employees, one employee directed to each state, and take all $300 billion and make it block grants to parents as a child tax, as a voucher system from the federal government. It'd be about $5,000 a student across the country. I'd be for that. Anyway, yeah. So that's about all. Honestly, they shouldn't be doing anything. They shouldn't be spending any money. But if you can't shut it down, then at least redirect the money.
Thank you.
Good question. All right, we're going to take a quick break. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. You are listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
President Trump made it clear the government will not go along with the woke agenda. Sadly, the gender radicals have intensified their attacks on our families. Would you sign the petition urging President Trump to stand strong in his resolution to stop the LGBTQ agenda in the government and in America? And please, consider a gift to keep AFA Action in the fight. To thank you for that gift, we'll send you the DVD in his image. Visit afaaction.net today. afaaction.net.
In a recent survey of 1,200 left-of-center American adults, 55% responded that assassinating Donald Trump could be justified. We're swimming in shark-infested cultural waters. Some are suffering from Christianophobia. Jesus said, if they persecuted me, they'll also persecute you. Please give today to help AFA keep equipping you and others to stand for Christ. Help us shine His light into our dark culture. Visit afa.net/warrior.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach, coming to you from Tallahassee, Florida. We're doing our Leadership Congress in Florida, and we shared one program with you last week with the students from the Leadership Congress. Got another one for you today, and we've been getting questions from the students. If you'd like to learn more about Leadership Congress, go to patriotacademy.com. Send your young people to us. 16 to 25, I promise you, we'll send you home leaders. Come here and learn how to do public speaking, how to work our room, how to do better in terms of just making your life plan, figuring out what your purpose is, finding out what God's called you to. Find that purpose and that passion, and we'll come alongside you at Patriot Academy. So 16 to 25-year-olds, you have the opportunity to still come to the National Patriot Academy Leadership Congress, which is the last week of July, or you can go to the Midwest, which will be at the Indiana Capitol, which is in Indianapolis, and I believe it's the middle of August, or right towards the end of August. And then if you're a military veteran, check out our Military Veterans Leadership Congress. That one will be the second week of August in Texas at the Patriot Academy campus, along with our Constitution coaches. In other words, there's a program for you, whatever your age is. Go check it out, patriotacademy.com. Okay, we got more questions coming from the students here at Patriot Academy. Name, where you're from, and then your comment, question, insult, or testimonial, whatever.
All right. I'm Edward Sager. I'm originally from Sebring, Florida. I'm in Atlanta for right now.
And you sound more like you're from Alabama than all those other posers that just came up here.
Anyways, my question is going to sound a lot less smart than everybody else's, but I'm just curious what your preferred concealed carry setup is.
Oh, that's a very smart question. Are you kidding? Hey, I don't care how smart you are. If you're dead, you're not going to be very smart, right? So you got to have a sidearm to protect yourself. So my EDC is a 1911. I'm a 1911 guy. I used to be a Glock guy. All my boys and I trained on Glocks forever, and then I was able to hold a 1911 and take headshots for the first time, and I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm home." And so I've never stopped with the 1911. Now my boys went back to Glocks, so all my boys are now Glock guys. But yeah, 1911 is my preferred. I actually have I have a lot of different 1911s, but my normal carry when I'm traveling is a 6-hour C3, which is a little smaller than full size, and it's a 45. Most 1911s are 45 for those of you that aren't shooters. And but my favorite carry gun is a Gun Crafter, which is made by the same guys up in Northwest Arkansas, all the engineers that did Wilson Combat and Nighthawk, and it's a sweet gun. That gun is I usually pack that gun and then ask my wife if she wants to go. That was another joke. Come on. What is with this group? Man, not one laugh out of that.
We're tired.
They're already tired. We still got a whole day to go. Okay, next up. You're back.
Hello, it's me again, Elijah. Yes, I am back. I did have a question for you, but first I want to actually answer one of yours from earlier in the segment, if you don't mind, which is why Tallahassee is the capital of Florida.
Yes, and these Floridians are awfully defensive. I mean, if you say anything bad about Florida, y'all are like Texans. Go ahead.
So actually the capital of Florida was St. Augustine when it was under Spanish control, but there was a brief period in time where the Spanish sold Florida to the French, and they established a community in what was known as West Florida and made Pensacola the capital and divided Florida into two states, really, West Florida and Florida. Once it became a single state again, once Spain again bought it, they combined the capitals. They thought it was pointless to have two capitals, so they met in the middle in Tallahassee.
Not good enough, because I still object to Tallahassee being the capital, because it's still a pain to get here, and you don't have enough good flights. So nice explanation, but it's still difficult. No, yeah, my favorite part of what you just described was I forgot all about the St. Augustine thing, because St. Augustine is also where 3 of the signers of the Declaration were captured by the British and held there throughout the Revolution. And there was actually a mission from some of the Georgia folks to come try to rescue them, and they lost the battle and weren't able to rescue the guys. And I forget the guy's name. I think it was Bunton Gwinnett or Quentin Burnett. Bunton Gwinnett. He ends up getting so mad he had gotten into a big fight with the guy that was governor. He demanded a duel, and he ends up dying in the duel less than a year after the Declaration of Independence. I can't remember all the details of it, but I remember it happened in St. Augustine, because I went out there and made a little video, and there was a sign explaining the whole story, and pretty cool. Hey, good stuff. Thank you for the history lesson. Did you have another question too? Oh, okay, go ahead.
So my question for you is one that kind of my household voted differently in the election on. So Florida had an amendment recently about having partisan school board elections. What would your take on partisan elections in smaller offices such as school board or mosquito control, which we have in Pasco County?
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of that at city council, school board, whatever it is, just simply because it's really hard to tell what somebody's philosophy is. And it's no guarantee, right? Just because they have an R or a D or whatever other party beside their name is not a guarantee that they're going to represent your values and what you see as an R or D or whatever. But it at least gives you an idea. And they have to, and I actually prefer always having a primary so that you have an opportunity to get the best candidate for each party. Now, that would be hard in school board and city council, because it's hard enough just to get people to show up for the general election in those. But from a just hypothetical, theoretical, what would be best kind of thing, in my mind, definitely having a party that you have to affiliate with so that there's at least some hint of what your governing philosophy is going to be. And then I also am a big fan of having some sort of primary or caucus in order to weed out the ones that are not really of that party, or they're posing. It's also why I'm a fan of caucuses even over primaries. I love what Iowa and these other states do. I think the fact that you have to show up, no matter how much snow there is, no matter how bad the weather is, you got to show up in person and hang out for a couple hours to be able to cast your vote, I think is good. I think that way you have people that are actually paying attention, that actually care the most about the system showing up.
Thank you.
You bet. Good question. Okay, who's next? Are you getting coaching over there, or are y'all just trying to decide which question to ask?
Yeah, I'm just trying to. What's your question first?
Okay. All right, go for it.
My question, I'm Adeline Ost. I'm from Orlando, Florida. And my question is, would you vote in favor of repealing the 19th Amendment? Should the right to vote be regulated by the federal government? And what are your reasons?
Oh, man. No, I would not. I would not support a repeal of the 19th Amendment. Oh boy, I'm going to get myself in trouble. No, I'm not going to say. So I would not. I would not support repeal of the 19th Amendment. I do think that there should be some federal guidelines on voting for federal office, but not necessarily for state office. So I think and that's what the Constitution actually says. So I think if you're going to have any kind of a trustworthy system, it's got to be uniform. And so you got to know that when you're choosing your electors or you're voting for Congress, that it's somewhat the same across the country. Now, the Constitution does allow for somewhat, not the day can't be different, but there can be different qualifications based on what the state qualifications are for the lower house and the legislature. But I am all for, and I don't know if this is what you were getting at or not, but I am all for a federal requirement, literally in the Constitution, that only legal citizens can vote, and that we have to have paper ballots that can actually be hand counted if there's any question of integrity or any question about what happened. I went through my first election in 1998. I know that was before any of you were born, but in 1998, I ran for the state house. 30,000 people voted, and I lost by 20 votes. We had a recount. We put our hands on every single ballot. We counted them together. My opponent and me, our teams, we all went through every single one of those 30,000 ballots, and I won by 36 votes. I look at my opponent and I said, you can have a second recount. Texas law allows you to, just to make sure we got it right. He says, we just looked at every ballot. I don't want to. You won. I don't like the fact that you won, but you won. Nobody claimed cheating. Nobody, said the system was rigged, because we had transparency. Everybody could come and watch that recount. Anybody that wanted to have the recount could have the recount. We had verification, just the ability to do a recount. And then we had legal remedies. So if for instance, if the county judge or whoever had refused to open the ballots and allow us to do that, we could have sued them and had a legal outcome. If you look back at 2020, it wasn't just the machines. It was people changing the law without constitutional authority. So you had state legislatures not involved. You had a governor, for instance, in Pennsylvania and other states, it was the state Supreme Court. In Georgia, it was the Secretary of State changing the law without the legislature, changing how the election was going to take place. And so that was unconstitutional. Those states should have been thrown out from the beginning. Or it should have gone back to their legislature, and the legislature could have chosen the electors, which the Constitution does allow for, and the Supreme Court has ruled on that multiple times. But anyway, I think the idea is that we should be able to put our hands on it, recount it, and I think that should actually be in the Constitution, so it's guaranteed to everybody. And the other thing I think I mentioned yesterday, I also think as a part of that amendment to the Constitution, we should add an amendment that says you can only count legal citizens in the enumeration, so that we get the numbers right in Congress. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. What would be your preferred change at the federal level on elections? Because you wouldn't be asking that question if you hadn't already thought something should be done at the federal level, or whether or not the federal feds should have any say. Or is this based on the fact that President Trump has been talking about requiring paper ballots?
This is because...
Go ahead and come over and talk about it.
This is because somebody filed a bill that repealed the seventh... Yes, at Patriot Academy. And he wanted to repeal the 19th Amendment. Okay, and so I was wondering if that was something that the federal government should regulate.
Yeah. No, I got you now. I totally understand. And yes, the same thing applies to the 15th Amendment, making sure you can't discriminate in voting based on race. So the 19th is you can't discriminate in voting based on sex. The 26th, you can't discriminate based on age, down to 18. 24th, you can't discriminate based on money, so no poll tax. So all 4 of those are protections to make sure that the citizen is allowed to participate and vote. And yeah, I do support the idea that would be something that we could enforce at the federal level. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, this one is like a little bit more not young kid friendly.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so what do you think life imprisonment versus the death penalty? Do you think that the sword of the government extends to rape circumstances? Do you think it would be better for a rapist for life imprisonment or the death row? Because I think it's better for life imprisonment for almost all circumstances, if not all.
And is your reason for being for life imprisonment instead of the death sentence is just to not end that life, to allow that life to end naturally?
Yes, mainly for that. And so for the person who committed the crime, I would assume they're not a Christian, and so maybe they could get saved.
So yeah, so if you take their life, electric chair, whatever, if you give the death penalty, you're ending their chance of coming to the gospel. Now, as a Calvinist, that doesn't bother me one bit. That was a joke too. Come on, man, I am losing. Thank you. Only the hyper theologians in the room are laughing. Okay. I get what you're saying, and you could even argue the what was the lady's name in Texas, the axe murderer that everybody tried to get Bush to pardon because she had become a Christian and she was actually spreading the gospel in the prisons, and he said, I'm glad she became a Christian, but the law has a requirement, and this is the punishment, and we can't lift that punishment just based on what somebody says after they did the law. We should apply the law. So I am a fan of the death penalty. I think the idea that we would spend millions of dollars to keep someone alive for the rest of their life in a situation like a child rape or a murder. Well, let me back up. If society has said that particular crime is so heinous that it deserves the death penalty or life in prison, and we're trying to choose between one of the two, in that case, I would choose the death penalty so that there's not a financial burden on society. Also, so that there is, quite literally a deterrent. I'm all for public hangings and going back to, people literally seeing this is the punishment. Whenever you do this thing in our society, this is the punishment. And that's not going to stop all of them. If somebody's on psychotropic drugs, which almost all mass murderers are, when they go shoot up a school or something, they're on some sort of psychotropic drug. Deterrence is not going to work with that particular murderer, but it does decrease the number of murders and crime because it elevates the culture of life and the culture of consequence and protection. So anyway, that would be my long-winded answer to that. This would be a fun one to actually have a extended conversation on, because I'm not even sure you couldn't change my mind on some of that.
Such a serious.
Yeah, it's such a serious subject. There's such huge repercussions and obviously eternal repercussions that it is. That's why as lawmakers, y'all are getting a little taste of this over these few days in the legislature. It's a big deal. When you cast that vote, you know that your vote for what the law is going to be in your state is going to impact lives. It may end lives. It will certainly determine justice in your state. You're gonna pass or defeat laws that impact how easily someone can seek justice or how they can fight back against injustice. What's your ability to fight against a bad DA that's coming after you or your family? What's your ability to be able to live out your Bill of Rights and actually get due process? So when you guys vote on this stuff here, it's not totally for real, but it feels like it when you're voting on it because you're taking it serious, because you know that these are in some cases life or death situations. Okay, let's see if we can squeeze in one more before we run out of time.
My name is Solomon Stiles. I live in Monticello, Florida, about 40 minutes east of central Tallahassee. And my question is a little bit more of a simple one. Could you explain what poll tax is?
So basically, a poll tax is basically where you would have to go in and it wouldn't necessarily be super expensive, but you might have to pay $5 to offset the cost of putting on that election. And we haven't had them for years. I think the 24th Amendment was passed, 23rd would have been, 25th was late 60s, would have been probably 50s whenever we did it. Most places didn't have it anyway by that time. And the whole idea is that even if you allowed for a little one, that eventually somebody could ramp that sucker up to where if you got to pay $1,000 to vote, then very few people are going to vote. So it's just to prevent people from being excluded from the process based on how much money they got. Good question, man. All right, we're out of time for today. Patriots, thank you for joining me here on At the Core. Folks listening, thank you for listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.